Hi, everyone. My name is Erica T. Patterson, and I'm the Senior Director of the Climate Campaign at Pacific Environment. And I'm really pleased to welcome everyone to our panel discussion today called Local Connections, Global Impact, Cleaning and Greening the Shipping Industry. Today, we'll be focusing on Pacific Environment's efforts to clean up the shipping industry and protect portside communities across the Pacific Rim, as well as share some ways that all of you can get involved to support our work. Before we get started, though, one housekeeping item for our audience is if you have any questions for our speakers throughout, you are more than welcome to drop those into the chat, and we will do our best to address them all at the end of the discussion. In the meantime, I would love if all of our viewers could add where you're watching from in the chat. I am personally joining from Los Angeles, California today. All right. I see we have some folks joining from DC, Sacramento. All right, Oakland, West Coast heavy representation. Nice, Anchorage, Alaska. Oh, Cleveland, Ohio. All right. Oh, Fresno, California. Ooh, New York City. All right, Sedona, Arizona. We are covering the map. It's so great to see all this geographic representation in the room today. San Diego, Virginia Beach. Nice. Avon Lake, near Cleveland, Ohio. All right. Well, it looks like we are approaching a critical mass, so I think we can go ahead and kick things off. Once again, welcome to all of our viewers. Thank you again for joining this conversation today. I'm really honored to be joined by my four brilliant colleagues from PE's climate team who oversee our Ports for People and Ship at Zero campaigns, as well as our state, local, and federal policy campaigns. And for those of you who are new to Pacific Environment, we are a global NGO that got its start in 1987, working with local communities across the Pacific Rim to fight pollution and climate change while protecting our marine and Arctic ecosystems. Our climate program deploys a multi-pronged approach to tip the global shipping industry off of fossil fuels. And so in practice, this means that we push progressive port authorities and their regulators to both set and accelerate conditions for a zero-emission shipping future. You'll also hear about how we are mobilizing cargo customers to commit to zero-emission shipping in their supply chains to show that the industry is also ready for this transition. And these local and state actions, coupled with industry action, generate momentum for greater ambition and stronger standards at the federal and international stage. Our corporate and policy advocacy strategies truly work in parallel to drive change and reinforce each other. And so to sustain and expand this critical work, we need your support. Please consider donating today. The link should be on your screen and in the chat. And truly, every contribution helps us continue protecting communities and the planet from ship pollution. Now, before we dive into today's discussion, I am so thrilled to get to welcome my esteemed colleagues to introduce themselves. And I'm going to hand it over to Fern to get us started.
Yeah. Hi, everyone. My name is Fern, and I'm the Climate Campaign Director for Ports, and I lead our place-based campaigning at major ports in the US. My team and I work alongside environmental justice communities to put pressure on ports and the shipping industry to really accelerate their transition to zero emission. And I'll pass the mic over to my colleague, Jonathan.
Yeah, thank you so much, Fern. Greetings, everyone. My name is Jonathan, and I'm the climate campaign manager for our corporate bucket of work. I help to lead our work that's going to help advance the decarbonization of maritime shipping while also pushing companies to be leaders on investment in zero emission shipping technologies. And excited to be with you, everyone, today. And I'll pass it on to Antonio.
Yeah, thanks, Jonathan and Erica. Great to be here. My name is Antonio Santos. I am the Federal Climate Policy Director at Pacific Environment based here in Washington, D.C. In my role, I work on PE's clean shipping advocacy efforts with the administration, federal agencies, and in Congress, as well as our at the international level with the International Maritime Organization. I'll pass it over to my colleague, Teresa.
Thanks, Antonio. Hi, everyone. My name is Teresa Bowie. I'm the Climate Policy Director. I've been with Pacific Environment for about 3 years and calling in from Sacramento, California. I work on our regulatory and legislative affairs, mostly focusing on state level work such as California, Washington, Oregon, and New York. Pleasure to be here today with you all.
Thanks, Teresa, and thank you all so much. I'm super excited for our viewers to hear more about our work from each of you today. And Jonathan, let's start with you. The Ship It Zero campaign is central to our efforts to decarbonize the maritime sector. Can you give us an overview of the campaign and some of the challenges we're facing in transitioning the shipping industry to cleaner energy sources?
Yeah, for sure. Thank you so much, Erica. As we kind of already alluded today, we're leading our effort on maritime shipping decarbonization campaign. And as we're going to talk a little bit more, and really excited for my colleagues to chime in as well for their pieces, decarbonization, especially in the maritime sector, is something that impacts all of our lives. I know it's not, talking about shipping decarbonization isn't necessarily, we're thinking about the holiday coming up, a Thanksgiving conversation. But again, whether we're talking about the smartphones in our pockets, the refrigerators where we keep our food, maritime shipping and the pollution that companies are causing takes a huge toll on the health of our communities. As it stands, the EPA estimates approximately 39 million people live near ports in the US, and millions more who are impacted by the transportation of those goods from the ports to the stores that we actually shop at. And again, this is including whether you're engaged in online shopping or whether you're going to a brick and mortar. The pollution that the companies are causing has a very real impact. And really, our communities are facing that direct impact of shipping pollution. Whether we're talking about the increased frequency of climate fueled disasters, again, we've seen the heightened increase of hurricanes, wildfires, other things that we've seen constantly in the news. That's happened in recent years, as well as health impacts like the increased rates of asthma and other respiratory illnesses in the communities across the United States. And I think it goes without saying that the data shows us very clearly that these are communities who are portside and fence line communities who are primarily communities of color. And these are the people who are on the front lines of climate disaster. And the fact is, we need maritime shipping to rapidly decarbonize in order to see any kind of reverse in these impacts.
Absolutely, Jonathan. And those are all really massive threats to public health and the climate. Can you tell us more about how Pacific Environment is addressing these issues, especially how we're motivating companies to do their part to clean up the shipping industry? And maybe a preview of what some of the key demands Ship It Zero is making of companies.
Yeah, absolutely, Erica. And Erica knows I could talk about this ad nauseum in our one-on-one calls. I talk about this all the time. But again, that's where the Ship It Zero corporate campaign comes in. We're actively engaging major companies that can significantly influence shipping decarbonization. We know if there are companies with the resources and influences who can start to make the change and make those key investments in zero emission technologies, that many of the companies that we're engaging with, again, whether we're talking about Walmart or we're talking about Amazon, Home Depot, as well as even shipping carriers that may not be household names. When we think about a Maersk, when we think about a Hapag-Lloyd, these are companies with the resources and influence to be able to make those key investments in zero technologies that can have a domino effect on the industry and actually help reduce emissions and that pollution it's causing. As far as our campaign, Our key demands are pretty simple. End port pollution now. So really engaging things like shore power vessels, electrified ports, abandoning dirty ships and dirty fuel like LNG. LNG is a no-no. And putting zero at the helm by publicly committing zero emission shipping by 2030 with clear action steps to get there. Again, gone is the time of just being able to say we're signing on to a commitment to do something with a faraway goal. We really need these companies to take very clear, actionable steps that are going to be able to stave off some of the effects that we're seeing in the short to midterm, but ultimately in the long term, get us to a zero emission future. Now, at first glance, maybe that sounds a little scary. Maybe that sounds a little naive and overly ambitious. But we really need companies to really step up in this way to avert the intense climate disasters that we're seeing and the frequency of which we're seeing. Whether we're looking at some of our past campaigns, folks who have been following our journey may be familiar with our work around Target, or even some of our current work around Amazon, where we've had the Prime Polluter Report. We did the Amazon action in Seattle. There have been a number of things that we're really making it clear that these companies who have the resource, who have the influence, we're going to get their attention. We're going to do the things that we know are working and having an impact, and really draw attention to the fact that it's having an impact on communities. You need to reduce the pollution and use that resource, the level of resources and influence you have for good instead of not so good. The truth is, we're going to be taking more than a couple companies to actually make this project. So again, we've done work around Target, done work around Amazon. We're currently actively engaging Home Depot, IKEA, a lot of household names that a lot of you all are approaching. But again, it's going to take more than just a handful of companies to actually do the change. We need the industry to shift. And that's where you all come in. As we're advancing our campaign strategies, we continue to put pressure on the companies. We continue to engage people like you who are supporting us and allow us to be bold and ambitious. Again, especially in the climate, the political climate that we're in, the dangers that we're seeing with the impacts of climate chaos, we need more people power and more folks who are joining in with us to push these companies to be better and do better. We know it's possible. We've already started to see the kind of cracks in the scaling of the wall, and knowing that these companies have the capacity to do better, and we just need more of them to do that. And as you all support our work, we're able to continue to push and do greater and bigger and bolder things that are actually going to allow us to have impact. And I know I get long-winded, but I'll just close here by saying that, for the health of our planet and our communities on the front line of maritime pollution, PE, we really truly believe PE is uniquely and ambitiously positioned to pursue this fight. With your support, we know that whether we're talking about research, whether we're talking about direct action, whether we're talking about the data that we're producing, we know the work that we're doing, especially in my work with the corporate campaigning, is really helping to push and advance the zero emission solutions that we need, that we truly need, and that we know will help our communities.
Couldn't agree more, Jonathan. Thank you so much. It's really true that our supporters are part of the magic in our formula for winning these important gains with company action and catalyzing industry action to demand zero emission technology from both major retailers and shipping carriers would significantly accelerate this transition. So thank you for all your work to get these companies to step up to the plate, and thanks to our Ship It Zero supporters for contributing to that momentum. Fern, so I'm going to turn to you next. Pacific Environment's Ports for People campaign focuses on reducing the harmful impact of ship pollution on port communities. What progress would you say we've made in transitioning ports to zero emission alternatives?
Yeah, thanks, Erica, and thanks, Jonathan. Actually, I just want to say a little more about some of the sort of health impacts that our communities who are portside, still really experience today. And as Jonathan mentioned, the EPA, the Environmental Protection Agency, estimates that over 39 million people live near ports. And unfortunately, these are communities that are primarily people of color and low-income residents who have really faced, decades of health impacts from shipping pollution. I'll just give you an example. In Los Angeles and Long Beach, ships emit about 20 tons of smog-forming pollution each day. And this is like adding about 6 million cars a day in the LA and Long Beach area. And all of this pollution is really worsening the health of nearby communities like West Long Beach, where we see that childhood asthma rates are higher and life expectancy is 8 years shorter in West Long Beach community compared to the county average. And to take it out to like kind of globally, maritime emissions cause over 260,000 premature deaths each year, as well as 6 million cases of, again, childhood asthma. So, really, when we think about ship pollution, it really has enormous impacts on people's health.
Wow, Fern, those are all truly devastating numbers. And yeah, but I mean, at the same time, I know that we have made some headway towards cleaning up ports and cutting shipping pollution. Could you share a bit about the positive changes we've seen so far and maybe some of the challenges that still lie ahead for portside communities?
Yeah. On a positive note, I think we have made significant progress, Erica. For instance, in Los Angeles and Long Beach, we've secured resolutions that commit the cities to advance measures and legislations to start phasing out dirtier ships and to start requiring zero-emission ships at ports. So, to refer back to what Jonathan has been doing to push companies to do what they can to phase out dirtier ships and to adopt zero emissions. We're mirroring that on the city side to really work with local governments and ports themselves to really kind of mandate these changes. In addition, LA and Long Beach cities are also committing to efforts to advance zero-emission shipping corridors along California's coast. So we need to move on the corporate side, but we're also working to move actions on the local governments and port side. I'll give some more examples. I think we've been doing pretty powerful work to mobilize communities. For example, in Long Beach City and also Tacoma in Washington State, we've been able to halt LNG facility expansion plans by gathering more than 1,000 petitions and knocking on thousands of doors, resulting in those expansions being halted. I would also say that in Newark, New Jersey, where we're now working, we're engaging with the city council to pass a land use ordinance to ban fossil fuel bunkering facilities going forward. And this is really, our attempt to try and limit the traditional fuel growth, while we're also working with the city and the port to start to plan for cleaner energy solutions. And then I'll also mention that this year we saw historic federal investment in ports, including EPA's $3 billion Clean Ports Grant Program. And we've been collaborating with ports to prioritize infrastructure upgrades like shore power installation, including things like robust workforce development plans. And as a result, some of the ports that we work with have received substantial funding, including, LA ports have received $400 million, and the Port of New York, New Jersey will be receiving $300 million. And really, these efforts, while focusing on US ports, they really have global impact. Major ports like Seattle, Tacoma, and Oakland and Long Beach and LA are part of green shipping corridors that drive decarbonization worldwide, and which is really kind of the theme of this talk, of this, which is local connections and global impact, the progress that we're making and trying to make further at the local level, from policies to infrastructure projects to stimulating adoption of cleaner fuels, really kind of help stimulate the transition globally. I know I'm also going on a little bit, but I'll just touch quickly on your other question around what challenges we still see. So while I've spoken about some of the really, unprecedented level of investments that are coming to the ports, we still need a lot more. And the Clean Ports program, was way oversubscribed. The EPA received way more funding requests than they were able to meet. And so I would say we need significantly more investments from both the public and private sources in order to help us through this transition.
Thank you so much, Fern. Really powerful stuff. And regarding the challenges, I'd say, on one hand, it's encouraging to hear that many ports are demonstrating interest in upgrading their infrastructure to be zero emission. But it is definitely concerning that there's such a mismatch of demand and availability for funds to clean up ports. So thank you so much to you and our ports team for all that you are doing to build power with portside communities, to advocate for cleaner ports, and to secure resources to make this transition possible. And for our viewers, as you've heard from both Jonathan and Fern, our Ports for People and Ship at Zero campaigns have seen lots of success. Since the launch of Ship at Zero, for instance, we've secured key commitments from Amazon, IKEA, Target, all around phasing out fossil-fueled shipping and aiming for a 100% zero carbon ocean shipping future by 2040. And our Ports for People resolution is truly becoming a model for progressive ports that are ready to partner with community to bring about a zero emission ports future. But while we are making great strides at the corporate and port levels, we definitely can't do this work alone. That is another part of the theme of today's conversation. Your support is so crucial to helping us sustain this momentum, especially with the political shifts that we're seeing. So please consider donating to Pacific Environment right now. Every bit helps, and your donations are tax-free. You should see the link again in the screen in the chat section. And big thank you to everyone who's donated so far, and to everyone who's been sending in questions. We'll definitely try to make some time for those at the end. And shifting gears a bit, I want to turn to our next speaker, Antonio. We know that the political landscape is a major factor in our policy advocacy. And the election results from earlier this month absolutely impact what clean shipping legislation we can pass to protect portside communities, especially at the federal level. And during his first term, President-elect Donald Trump reversed over 100 environmental regulations, withdrew the US from the Paris Agreement, gutted environmental agencies, and promoted climate denialism in his administration. In a sign of what we can expect from the next administration, Trump has announced his new EPA administrator, Lee Zeldin, a former member of Congress, who only has a mere 14% rating on the League of Conservation Voters environmental scorecard. Antonio, you have been leading our federal advocacy on shipping, including supporting the Biden administration on ways that the US can drastically reduce ship pollution. Could you maybe give us a brief update on where those efforts are at now?
Yeah, thanks, Erica. Pacific Environment and our allies have been working on multiple pathways at the federal level to accelerate action to reduce both greenhouse gas and air pollutant emissions from ships. Our overall strategy is that technology forcing policies as well as public funding mechanisms are needed to fully transition the industry away from fossil fuels to cleaner solutions. So to that end, in Congress, several important bills have been introduced during the current legislative term that specifically address decarbonizing the maritime sector, namely the Clean Shipping Act, which would set greenhouse gas fuel standards for ships calling on U.S. ports, the International Maritime Pollution Accountability Act, which would levy pollution fees on ships calling on U.S. ports, and the Zero-Emission Vessel Innovation Act, which I'm happy to announce was introduced just yesterday in the House of Representatives by Representative Nanette Barragan. That bill would provide significant funding on the order of $1 billion per year over the next 10 years for the development and deployment of zero-emission vessels and supporting infrastructure. For all of these bills, PE's advocacy has helped build co-sponsor support in Congress, as well as help build support from a broad range of stakeholders, including environmental organizations, environmental justice groups, and the shipping industry. On a parallel pathway, we sent a letter to the Biden administration last year calling on the administration to issue an executive order to accelerate action to decarbonize the shipping sector. That letter had support from over 68 organizations and more than 25,000 concerned citizens. The letter itself contained 7 recommendations that the administration could implement to unlock opportunities to decarbonize the maritime sector while also creating high-quality jobs and advancing environmental justice. Even though we're coming to the end of the current administration, we continue to stay engaged with them to look for ways to implement these recommendations. I'll say we're also working with them right now to try and implement specific actions in the next 2 months to help advance our long-term maritime decarbonization goals.
Thank you so much for those reflections, Antonio, and for all your work to push for federal action on shipping decarbonization. And definitely want to give a huge congratulations to you on the announcement of the Zevia bill yesterday. That's massive. Building on your reflections so far, could you share a bit about how you think that the presidential and congressional election outcomes will change the course of federal clean shipping efforts?
Yeah, I mean, clearly, that's definitely the question on all of our minds right now with the election just a couple of weeks ago. So the results of the election will certainly make things more challenging for us to advance some of our federal policies. But, right, I mean, that just means the work that PE does will be all the more important, right? So, yes, under the current administration, the Biden administration, yes, there have been some challenges, and we have consistently urged them to do more. But the administration has also provided frameworks for the transition to cleaner shipping. Given the Trump administration's stance on climate change, no doubt federal action on maritime decarbonization will be curtailed. So action by leaders at the international, state, and local level will likely take on elevated importance. And going forward, building bipartisan support, I think, for our efforts will be crucial. So emphasizing things like job creation, economic benefits due to the clean energy transition, energy independence, national security, U.S. leadership on zero-emission ships, right? All of those things will be important in our messaging going forward. Also, we'll need to be vigilant to prevent any rollback of climate policies that were put in place under the current administration, such as the climate funding under the Inflation Reduction Act. So unfortunately, yeah, we'll probably have to devote some resources to playing defense as well.
Thanks so much for that assessment, Antonio. You actually mentioned international efforts earlier. Could you also please share how you see global action influencing progress on clean shipping, regardless of U.S. politics?
Yeah, well, at the international level specifically, we remain optimistic that the International Maritime Organization in London will move ahead and adopt ambitious greenhouse gas standards, fuel standards, and a carbon fee next year as planned in 2025. But yes, within the change in administration, the US delegation stance in the IMO negotiations may change, but we believe the majority of member states are already on board, and that, in the end, we'll approve a basket of measures that phases out greenhouse gas emissions from shipping by the end or no later than 2050, while also promoting a just and equitable transition. But regarding the election, Erica, let me just say, maybe echoing what my previous speakers have said, regardless of who's in the White House, right, PE and our allies will continue the fight both in the US and abroad. And the transition to zero-emission shipping, for the most part, I think we all agree, has already begun. So I think I can speak for all of my colleagues here that we're not going to be turning back.
Thanks again, Antonio. Appreciate those reflections. And yeah, while we may need to pivot our federal advocacy more towards a defense approach like you were outlining, we all know that Pacific Environment's federal advocacy is not our only approach. We've also invested time and effort into pursuing state-level legislation and action in first mover states like California and Washington. Teresa, California has long been recognized as a leader in environmental policy. Could you discuss any recent state-level legislative achievements or regulations that are bringing us closer to a zero-emission shipping future?
Sure, Erica. Yeah, California has always been a leader on climate, including on shipping. California recently passed the first zero-emission standard in the nation, and as a result, we are seeing the regulation become reality today. Just this year in June, we saw the first all-electric tugboat launch at the Port of San Diego, called the eWolf, and then in July, we saw the first hydrogen fuel cell ferry, the Sea Change, launch at the Port of San Francisco. So we're really excited to see that the regulation that California passed is becoming live today. Pacific Environment worked to pass that rule. We helped lead a coalition of environmental justice groups in support of that rule, and now we're working to defend and push for its robust implementation. Since the passage, we've also worked to support Singapore, and we saw that Singapore adopted an even more stringent rule than California on hovercraft. So that just shows California's leadership has a ripple effect globally. And then earlier this year, the California Air Resources Board, or CARB, has gone on record committing to tackling emissions from ships in transit, going from point A to point B. So while California has taken important steps to reduce emissions or pollution from ships at berth by requiring ships to plug into shore power while docked in port, the in-transit pollution remains the biggest source of pollution coming from ships. So we're very excited about this move, and we will be pushing CARB to set as ambitious a policy as possible by setting zero-emission standards by 2040.
Wow, that is an impressive record of progress, Teresa. And I actually had the pleasure of seeing the Seawolf in person at the launch in San Francisco. And it was just so inspiring to see Pacific Environment's advocacy for clean shipping make technology like the Seawolf a reality. So congrats to you and our policy team on laying the groundwork for these wins. I do have a follow-up question for you, similar to what I asked Antonio. How do you think that the statewide election outcomes in California and Washington will or will not change the course of state-based clean shipping efforts?
Yeah, I mean, so California and Washington, they've always been a climate leader, and state leadership is needed more than ever. We anticipate that California Governor Newsom will continue to defend and uphold our air standards. And then we know that, Attorney General Bob Ferguson has been a great champion countering Trump's policy when he was the Washington Attorney General. And we anticipate that he will continue to do so as the new governor of Washington. In California, as I mentioned earlier, we have this opportunity to tackle ships going in transit. And then in Washington, just this election, Washington residents voted to protect the Climate Commitments Act, which with the defeat of I-2017, Washington voters have voiced their support for clean air and affordable fossil fuel-free energy. And so the state, Washington state, should use this momentum to continue leading the charge. We are pushing for the state to adopt a mandatory shore power policy, which would require ships to plug into shore power when they're idling at berth. And this policy has been shown to be immensely effective at reducing import pollution for both the port communities as well as port workers.
Thank you, Teresa. It's really great to hear about that growing support and momentum for shore power in Washington State. I did just want to let folks know that we had a little bit of technical difficulty with our feed a few moments ago, but we should be back and live now. So welcome back if you happened to get booted out earlier. And before we open it up for questions from our viewers, I'd like to once again thank Fern, Jonathan, Antonio, and Teresa for all their insights today, and of course, all of their incredible work. It is truly a great reminder of the impact that Pacific Environment is making on cleaning ports and cleaning up the shipping industry overall. This is an industry that is often overlooked in the climate movement, and that's even in spite of the fact that shipping pollution accounts for nearly 3% of global climate emissions. This underscores why it's so important for our viewers to donate and support our work today. We cannot do this work alone, as you heard from all of our speakers today. And so if you haven't done so yet, the links are back in the chat again for you to donate. So please join us in this fight to end the era of fossil fuels in shipping by giving what you can. Thank you so much. And as I mentioned earlier, if you have a question for our panelists, please drop them into the comment box below. One question I see is, can Pacific Environment make a starter pack on blue sky for green shipping? Is anyone feeling especially primed to jump in for that question?
I could jump in. My team knows I'm not the most technologically or social media savvy person, but I think, yeah, if there's ways that again, not fully familiar with Blue Sky, but if there's ways that we can engage on that side. I know there's been chatter about the shift from sites like X/Twitter to other social media platforms. I think it could only help but benefit our work for us to continue to like build opportunities for folks to really organize, build that community around the issues that we all very clearly care about and that we talked about today. But then also, kind of get a way to promote our work, which actually, speaking of which, I didn't get a chance to promote earlier, a little bit scatterbrained. This is also a great moment to say that when we're thinking about successes, we're thinking about the work, also naming that this week we actually released our retailer progress report, talking a little bit more since our 2023 report card came out about the progress that we've seen and not seen from a lot of the retail companies. So when we hear from Teresa, when we hear from Antonio, when we hear from Fern, you hear from myself as well. There's so many different things that we're doing. And yeah, I think it could only help to engage on another social media platform, although I'm not too savvy myself, and build community that way.
Thanks so much for jumping in, Jonathan. And thank you, Erin, for that question. I saw a couple more roll in, one of which is from Jared, which is, what is the role of international agencies in regulating shipping? And I wonder if I could maybe pass that over to Antonio to kick us off for that question.
Yeah, sure, Erica. And I also see a question from Shannon. Maybe I'll take both of them that sort of go together around how our PE staff is also supporting on the Asia front at the IMO. So yeah, Jared, good question. So I think for those who track maritime decarbonization, the International Maritime Organization seems like the obvious body to be regulating ships, right? And so there is a process going on right now at the IMO. Their job is to oversee the shipping industry, and they specifically are looking at, currently reducing greenhouse gas emissions from shipping. Having said that, right, the work that you just heard me talk about at the federal level, there's nothing within the US, right, that precludes them from moving forward to put in place effective policies around greenhouse gas emissions from shipping. We as PE have been involved both at the federal level and in London at the IMO, right, working on parallel pathways. And we've had some great support as well from PE staff who are in Asia. Once again, the member state body at the IMO is 175 countries, right? So the US is just one voice in that. And I think we're moving in the right direction for everything we've seen over the past year leading up to next year, when we're expecting the approval of an agreement at the IMO that we will put in place, we remain hopeful, effective and ambitious greenhouse gas fuel standards and a carbon levy. And this would not be possible with, as Shannon's question, without the work, of course, of our staff in Asia as well, who have been advocating at the IMO, having bilateral conversations with other countries over there, with other NGOs over there, with the Secretariat at the IMO to push for ambitious standards. So it's not just from the US and the delegation here, but also on the Asia front. And that's really important because, as we all know, when we look at the maritime industry, China, Japan, Korea are big players within the maritime world. So, kudos to the efforts of the staff in Asia in PE for that advocacy. But yes, there is work going on both ends, Jared. The IMO is a critical voice in this, but whatever comes out of that, we're still pursuing our efforts here in the US as well to be as ambitious as possible.
Thank you so much, Antonio. I couldn't have said it better myself. Raising ambitions across East Asia in major port hubs is definitely a significant factor in creating momentum for us to see action at the IMO, stronger action at the IMO. So thank you, and thank you, Jared and Shannon, for those great questions. With only a couple minutes remaining, I think we're going to have to close Q&A for now, but I do want to say thank you again to all of our viewers and to our panelists. All of us at Pacific Environment know our work would not be possible without the support of donors and advocates like you. And we still need your support. So please take a moment to click on the links and donate 10, 20, 50, or $100, whatever feels manageable for you. We're grateful for anything. Thank you so much, and have a wonderful rest of your day.